I told you so. Alright, let's put on some glasses of truth here. Let's have a swig of the only thing I like or miss from Miami, actually, apart from my family, is Cafe Bustelo, which has become a meme for some reason now among hipsters. I don't know why. Y'all ain't Cuban, so get off my Bustelo. But here we go. Welcome aboard, everyone. It's your host and founder of the American Rail Club, Demetrius Villa. Here we go again. I told you so. Wendover was wrong. So I stated in my previous live stream about Richard Anderson, the CEO now of Amtrak, who was the former CEO of Delta Airlines, and how that the goal of making Amtrak more profitable, taking down its cost, and making sure that it is a successful venture is a great goal. However, the method of doing it to make it more like an airline is the wrong method of going about. So Wendover in his last video went about that this was a good thing for Amtrak because Richard Anderson doesn't care about, historic lines or let's say anything about like the Sunset Limited or the history and importance of a obscure steam railroad that used to run 150 years ago. And that's not the reason why people ride trains, and I don't think he understands the fundamental reason that people ride trains in the first place is because it is an alternative to driving a car and to riding a plane. In other countries that are not the US, more developed countries that actually have built up rail systems, it is because they are often better and faster alternatives to driving and flying. And you can quote me on this. People don't want a slower plane. They want a faster train. And unfortunately, going this route is going to make Amtrak more of a slower plane than a faster train. So, a leaked memo, and this is probably true. If it's a leaked memo, Amtrak is considering airline-style changes to its ticketing policies, including non-refundable fares and change fees. Probably one of the worst things to ever come from airlines. Because here's the thing, they all want to become like Bob Crandall. So I've read this book, American Eagle, The Ascent of Bob Crandall and American Airlines, because I wanted to know more about the man and American Airlines and how the airline industry works and how it sort of got into its phase from, where it was before it became all privatized and whatnot, or privatized as we call it here, and the breakup of airlines. But, what the cost cutting that Bob Crandall did, it really took down a lot of the respect that people have for airlines, and this is the problem that we're coming over here. So let's go through some of the things in the article. So again, this is from Business Insider. I got the archive version because it's behind a paywall, and I will also give you guys the archive link because, putting it behind a paywall, I think it's sketchy. And you know me, I'm not about supporting the lying media half the time anyway. So Amtrak is considering making its cheapest fares non-refundable and non-changeable, according to an internal memo seen by Business Insider. Other fares will see a 25% cancellation fee and 15% change fee within 15 days of travel. Ancillary revenue and more fare segmentation has been a big focus of Amtrak leadership recently as they seek to bring many airline-style practices to the railroad. So if you don't know, again, this was all in the article, so I highlighted this. So they have saver fares, like they're gonna bring in super saver fares that American Airlines did back in the 80s, to become completely non-refundable and non-changeable 24 hours after purchase. The whole point of the train is because it's flexible. People don't want to go on the train because they want to have the same airline sort of experience. That's the absolute incorrect way of doing it. With the second level value fare subject to a 25% cancellation fee or 15% change fee within 14 days of departure. What on earth are they doing? So an Amtrak representative declined to comment because unfortunately, like the last time when they went ahead, and I did this in the last video, about the food amenities on Amtrak and how they're changing, it's getting worse. So yeah, they're making more money, but it doesn't really have to do with the changes that Richard Anderson is implementing, because Amtrak's ridership has been increasing very steadily in the past 2 decades. So ancillary revenue, for those of you who don't know, ancillary revenue is the revenue that airlines make on things that are not the ticket. So your baggage fees, your other little fees of, getting a wider seat, moving up to the line, and the crazy voodoo magic that they do in getting people into different groups and making sure they get onto the airplane where there's 5 people that need to go to the back and 5 people that need to go in the front, and it's this messed up tango of wasting time and energy, but it's done. Again, small changes, and this is how it starts. The small changes start to mount up and start to change the way of Amtrak. And again, like I said before, the switch to airline-style prepared meals on these services sparked fierce backlash from customers over both the food's quality, because it sucked. Okay, let's be honest. Amtrak's food wasn't the best to begin with, but it got even worse according to most people that I've talked to, most people that have taken it, and a lot of other journalists and bloggers who have actually gone on Amtrak and said, yeah, it kind of sucks. And an executive's blaming of the change on millennials. So I did that in a video on millennials and Zoomers killing Amtrak, which I'll also link as well. Which, again, it's an excuse to say that, again, millennials are killing this and that. And when it's not, it's the cost of what's going on is that most millennials are at this point poor, okay? And they're much poorer than the last generation. It is the first time in American history that a generation has been left with less than the previous generation. And I'll probably do that in a later video, probably on my second channel as well, because I have that planned on how doomed millennials are. Okay, so here's another good thing. Yeah, in November, Amtrak reported its highest annual ridership and smallest financial loss ever. And again, this doesn't have to do with Anderson. These are other changes that Wick Moorman also implemented before, and he was a railroad guy and started to help out Amtrak pretty well. But then when you get an airline guy in that, it's going to change the way things happening. And again, the small changes are going to take a while to start really forming themselves. And when people start to really complain and then ridership starts to decrease, even if the economy starts to increase as well, which again, I don't think so. We're probably heading into a recession pretty soon. That's going to change a lot. Okay, so I also have a whole bunch of articles over here because I want to go through this. So again, really the things that are going to make Amtrak more profitable is not about cost cutting, okay? And this is not because it's a whole Toyota thing or anything like that, because I've been reading about the Toyota production system as well. It's about increasing the value to customers. And the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are going to boost Amtrak are going to be, A, its on-time performance, okay? And when we talk about on-time performance, we're talking about its speed, its punctuality. Imagine if America ran like Japan. Oh man, you're going to have a bunch of sassy fits against implementing changes like that into Amtrak. That would be hilarious to see if they would even do that. Because again, it's the system of way of running things. And we've seen these small little things of Amtrak. Remember when they had the celebrating 40 years? When it was time to celebrate 45 years, that banner in the Sanford station for the auto train, that's embarrassing. And again, it's these small little things. Or taping up broken bathroom doors, or the bathrooms don't work, or the air conditioning doesn't work. See, these are the type of changes that Amtrak needs to make. We're not talking about just on-time performance, but we're also talking about amenities. And again, these are facts and figures which I've gathered and put together so you guys can see this. Amtrak, which has forecast record ridership in fiscal 2010, saw gains in ridership and revenue in June, with the strongest growth on trains coming and going from Washington. And this was July 13th of 2010. So I went back to look into the recession and see, well, what was Amtrak's ridership also during then? And since about the year 2000 and into now, Amtrak's ridership has been increasing. It only decreased 1 year, and that was during the recession. Again, so here's fiscal year 2008. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit more over here so you guys can see. Fiscal year 2008, 10,897,852. And then we have, fiscal year of 09, 9.9 million. So it only decreased by about 200,000. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not 200,000. It decreased by about 1 million there. But again, this is what happened, just from the recession. Okay, but that was just 1 year. But even then, it started to increase afterwards. So even then, to 2010, it started to increase. Okay, so it doesn't have to do anything about price. It's not trying to make it cheaper or super saver fares or anything like that. People want value for what they're getting. And like I said before, what Amtrak offers currently right now is not a good value. They need to bring up their on-time performance. They need to bring up the infrastructure and build that up. They need to bring more amenities. They need to bring punctuality and give more value to customers, to riders, to Americans and tourists who want to take Amtrak. It is a simple solution, but that's what I've done. And here's another article. So this is from How Stuff Works. Amtrak's ridership has increased dramatically in the last 2 decades, 55% since the late 90s, according to a 2013 Brookings Institute report. Again, we're seeing from the last decade of how this was going, starting from 2010 on to 2020. This is not something that Richard Anderson should be taking credit for. This is not Richard Anderson's thing. This is something that Amtrak has been doing, despite Amtrak's flaws and failings, is that people want another way to get around. The market wants an alternative solution to driving and flying. It's not even an argument about government or anything like that. In a purely capitalistic society, it's a market-driven solution. This is not hard to wrap your mind about. So here we go. Again, Amtrak's popularity in the Northeast, writes Nixon. So Ron Nixon in 2012 in the New York Times says it's been steadily since the Acela was introduced in 2000 and airport security was tightened after 2001. That's a big thing right here. Because again, people want something else. Acela was introduced, which is the pseudo high-speed rail that we have in the United States to connect Washington, D.C. to Boston. And that was an incredible feat that Amtrak did. So that increased. Again, it's giving more value to customers there. It's all overwritten here. I don't know how many times that we can say it. And even on Amtrak's own website. So again, the unique Amtrak experience with many benefits. No added fees are the first thing that come up on the website. Unlike the laundry list of surcharges airplanes pile on, Amtrak charges no extra fees. What you see is what you get. That's what people want. Amtrak will quote and price your travel at the lowest fare available at the time you make your reservation. And with no booking fee, it pays to check it out. That's the type of thing people want. No added fees, city-to-city service, quick and green travel, especially for our generation. I mean, we're tired of the amount of pollution that is coming out from roads, from airplanes. Again, I'm a very green guy as well. Okay, despite being conservative, a lot of more conservative minded folks in my age group are very, ecologically minded as well. We want a green planet. Okay, that's common sense to have that. It's our own home. You clean your home. You don't want it dirty. Room to roam. We don't want to be stuck in cramped spaces in the airlines. The BS that one of the VPs of Amtrak was saying that, people don't want to go, especially millennials, they don't want to sit next to other people on the dining cars and it makes them feel cramped. That there's some sort of loner incels or something like that, that we don't want to sit next to other people. No, of course we do want to sit next to other people. In fact, we hate being cramped together and forced in awkward situations. We want to be free to roam around and talk with other people in a natural situation like this. So even Amtrak says it. So Amtrak is going against its own sort of amenities here. This is a massive mistake. This is a massive mistake. If this is true, which unfortunately it probably is true, if this is happening, that they're doing more airline style changes, Amtrak is going to start losing ridership terribly. Okay, and it's gonna be again. So here's another thing that I looked from Vox. This was back in 2016. So again, we're going through the years, so you can see that Amtrak's ridership has been increasing. It has nothing to do with Richard Anderson. And I see my time tracker is going red. I'm going over 15 minutes. But this is something that needs to be talked about a little bit more in length, unfortunately, guys. So if you guys want to go ahead and put this on 2x speed and, listen to me in the long run, sure, go ahead. But this is something that needs to be important. We're probably going to be here for another 10 minutes or so because I want to get this out. I want to talk about this in detail as much as possible. And then I'll get to your comments below. I'll talk about what you guys think about all of this. And again, let's have a conversation because this is the reason why we're here. This is what we're about. The American Rail Club is a club to talk about trains in America, trains around the world, and how we can advocate and bring true transit solutions to America. That's what we're about. Where did our ads go, Vox? Well, I'm not paying for you guys. Here's how to whitelist Vox. You're gonna tell me to go ahead and put more work into whitelisting you guys? No, thank you. So why doesn't the Northeast have true high-speed rail? So this is part of the reason why Amtrak hasn't been able to really to really help itself out and to really increase the amount of services and make themselves better. It's because of the hypocrisy of the American system of what we have over here. And it's not to bash democracy or the republic, because if in theory how it's supposed to work, how the framers went ahead and put it all out, and again we can go ahead and argue this throughout, but it wasn't supposed to be to this point. Our government is so big that you can have crony capitalism like you have in China, and the governments and the companies are in cahoots to go ahead and make their own goals and ideas work, but not for the people. Okay? Because as long as they're able to live in gated communities and away from crime and poverty and whatnot, and as long as their families are doing fine, heck with the people, right? So why doesn't the Northeast have true high-speed rail? So again, there were some plans before in the previous decades to go ahead and build high-speed rail, and these were billion-dollar prices. Again, it's more about spending and whatnot, and Amtrak did propose to upgrade the Northeast Corridor, but the price was tagged at around $117 billion. It was probably going to be more, because this is usually the way that the government runs things, and we can only look at New York and the subway and see how that's run and go over there. And I did a previous video about why American railroads are so expensive, so you can go ahead and look at that as well. I'll have it linked as well so you can be able to see that. But here's some of the things that's going on. Let me just go ahead and write those down so I can remember to link them. Okay, so why are trains outside the Northeast so unbelievably awful? And again, it has to do with the infrastructure. Why don't we build a state-of-the-art high-speed rail network? It's because, look, here's all the billions of dollars that the stimulus was going to go. Only $11 billion that we got from the Obama stimulus, which did a little bit. It wasn't supposed to bring a true nationalized high-speed rail network. It wasn't ever going to do that anyway. And we can see what's going on in California. Again, the more spending that the government does in doing this, the more cost overruns is going to happen, and the more corruption through cost, because a lot of it is through labor costs and administrative costs. Really, it's not into construction or paying wages or anything like that. There's a lot of administrative fees that go into this and really bringing this out. Okay, so again, you have so many places that you can go, like Seattle, Portland, Dallas, Houston. There are so many city pairs around the United States that can be linked up with high-speed rail, and will take a massive share away from airlines. And this is why airlines are scared. So we have this, this hypocrisy in this system, because you have tools like Randy O'Toole that are part of the Cato Institute, which is, again, they're run by the Koch brothers. Okay, so they're the Koch brothers lobbyist libertarian attack dogs that you got over here. And I do have Randy O'Toole's book, and I have been reading through this and highlighting all over the place of the things that he's wrong on. Again, for those of you guys that don't know, the Cato Institute, they're not even true libertarians. They're fake libertarians. That the whole group has gotten hijacked. It was Murray Rothbard who started the group. It got hijacked from him so they can go ahead and lobby for more Koch brother type of libertarian garbage. So again, they're not even true libertarians. And I've been going through all these articles. Again, that Randy O'Toole says that there's nobody wants to ride on trains. Basically, this is this whole thing on here. And again, a lot of this is filled with so many fallacies and so many fake statistics. And going into here, like he basically lied about the Japanese government about JNR and why it was privatized and what was really going on, and that that they're still getting massive subsidies or whatnot. So again, a lot of this is wrong, and I have the books, and we have been going through this. I have a lot of the books and a lot of the research that a lot of these, I think he even quoted this. I'm not quite sure, but I think he even quoted this book, and the figure was completely wrong. So again, it doesn't have to do with funding. It doesn't have to do with that. It's simply about providing value. If you want to go through the libertarian sort of doctrine about that, we can go ahead and go through that. Because again, it has to do with providing value. And there's nowhere, not even in our own country, we've had that done. In our own state, in fact, of Indiana, which I'm residing in right now. So for those of you who don't know, the Indiana Hoosier state system that connected between Chicago to Indianapolis actually was privatized for a little bit, for a couple of years between 2015 and 2017. So the Indiana Department of Transportation, INDOT, contracted with Iowa Pacific and Amtrak to continue to run the Hoosier state because Amtrak was not available and was not going to be able to get the funding to run that because the federal government was cutting funding at that time. This was back during the Obama administration, so again, it has nothing to do with Trump or Republicans or anything like that. The Obama administration actually cut out federal funding for Amtrak. Okay, so with the Iowa Pacific responsible for providing and maintaining equipment, food service, and marketing, Amtrak responsible for providing ticketing services and train operating crews, because again, in the United States, we don't really have any operations that can be able to do that. So the contract was a 4-year option. It didn't go through the whole 4 years because the state of Indiana refused any more funding, and Iowa Pacific wasn't getting the support it needed, so it pulled out. But here's the interesting thing. So Iowa Pacific, when it was running the Hoosier state, they had, they updated the services. They had full course meals and everything like that. They had a dome car, which was beautiful. They brought in this, nice and swanky equipment. They had full Wi-Fi, which Amtrak doesn't even have Wi-Fi that runs good on any of its trains half the time because it goes off and shuts off. It's like bus Wi-Fi that was on, the FIU bus, the shuttle bus that I used to take between the Biscayne and MMC campus back in Florida. So look at this. On the service improvements instituted by Iowa Pacific took hold, including the addition of full-service dining, onboard Wi-Fi, business class service, and a dome car, ridership began increasing and was up 5.8% in July 2016 over the previous July, with fiscal year 2016 revenues up 32.8% from the prior year. Do you see that? This is what happens when people that care, and when you have a company that is not beholden to, running on the Hippocratic ways that airlines are running, because they get subsidized and the airlines are too big to fail according to the governments. They have bankruptcy protection. When you have this happen, things start to go better when people are thinking about the customer, the rider first. That's what has to happen. It's not about cutting costs, it's about increasing value. That's what you got to do. And unfortunately, this service, started to go down because Iowa Pacific was no longer able to fulfill the contract, asked to be released from the contract early because INDOT wasn't, giving the amount of support from what I hear. I don't know. I'm probably going to do a whole video on the Hoosier State later on, because this is something that needs to be looked at even more as a model. And of course, we can see what's going on with Brightline and how they're running their system and how much of a success that has been so far, and probably even more now that they're opening more stations. So again, and this is true. So I looked into Amtrak's monthly performance in the Hoosier State. Here we are. So the ridership did increase Okay, that's about like 7%. And then you have the revenues actually from over here. It looks like that it increased about like 67% of the budget and 70%. Okay, so maybe the number's a little bit even more according to this. Maybe it wasn't even 32.8%. Maybe it was even more. I don't know. Again, this is something that needs a little bit more looking into. But again, it increased because more value was given to it. The service was made better. And we can look at other places in the world too. So let's look at Hong Kong, which is probably the best private system in the world when it comes to rail. So this is what it looks like in Hong Kong. The stations over there. Look at the platforms. It looks like something out of Blade Runner or something like that. Look at how cool this is. I mean, you have like electronic screens. You have the screen doors, so dummies can't jump into the tracks or anything like that. You don't have any jaywalkers. So this is incredible. Look at the floors. You could probably throw food on the floors and eat right off the floor and you won't get sick. That's how clean this is. And they can be able to do stuff like that if you guys are Lego fans. You probably like the Lego train that they did before back in 2018. And they were even implementing QR codes. They have the octopus cards similar to the cards in Japan, like the Suica, which you can go ahead and tap to go into the train to pay for your fare. You can tap to go ahead and pay for groceries at a 7-Eleven or a Lawson's or something like that. So again, this is all things that can be done because it's privatized. Okay, there's no argument that can be done against that. Debate me. Go ahead. I want somebody to go ahead. I want a full debate that we can do on video about private versus publicly run transportation. Okay, I think we can go ahead and do the research, and this is, again, there is enough research, there's enough evidence to prove that this works. Okay, now look at what happened in New York. The insanely expensive 2nd Avenue subway. Okay, for 4 miles of subway. Actually, no, I'm sorry. For 2 miles of subway, they spent $4 billion to go ahead and make this. This was the most expensive infrastructure rail project per mile in history. Why? Because of the administrative costs and because of the corruption in New York City and the MTA, especially at the time of what's going on. And again, we've done a video on this, why American rails are so expensive and they're needlessly expensive. Okay, in the other parts of the country, other parts of the world, they don't nearly spend as much as we do. And this is all over the United States. The rest of the world spends less in education. They're smarter than us per capita, per student. We spend more per student than any other country. We spend more per person in healthcare, and healthcare still sucks in the United States. So again, it has nothing to do with pumping in more money. It's the way we're doing it. And look at the comments. Okay, so I like looking at comments because you get the real truth from people sometimes. And, the real conversation from people talking and having an open, free discussion really says a lot. So as long as the MTA has its budget controlled by New York State and not New York City, it will be almost impossible to get things done. This one was funny. Until the MTA can get its capital construction costs down to corrupt mafia-controlled bidders levels of insanity from its current third-world dictator level, the state should starve the MTA. At least the capital plan, although operations aren't that great either. Yeah, like the state's gonna even do that. And again, look at New York City's subways. Look at the stations. They look like trash. Even the amount of revenue from tax revenue that New York City gets, it's among the highest in the world probably. And again, this is horrible of what's going on. Just 3% of underground stops meet New York City's transit's cleaning schedule. There's rats everywhere. There's trash everywhere. It's disgusting. It's horrible. I've been to New York a couple of times, so many times in my lifetime. Half my family lives over in the area. My dad lived there for most of his life. So again, half my families are New Yorkers, New Jersey. We've seen this. We know it. It sucks. People that live in New York know it sucks. And it shouldn't. It's terrible. And look at Hong Kong. Look at this. They're doing more track replacements. Look at the tracks. Even the tracks look clean. I could probably, go ahead and lay down some like Cantonese cuisine all along here off of plates on the rail lines and all that, and I can just eat off of this. Look at this. This is clean. There's not even a candy wrapper on the tracks. That is insane. There's no rats or anything. Unbelievable. And then look at New York. Okay? This is what the government does. All right? And this is what private companies do. This was back when the subway was run, like the BRT and the Interborough Rapid Transit Company. This was the first companies that ran the subways. Okay? And for the beginning, they worked out perfectly well until the government started intervening into them and making sure, oh, you couldn't increase fares because people want to have the fares at the same time. So they were getting stuck and couldn't increase fares over inflation. And, of course, the New York City was building more roads, and you had that Robert Moses going ahead and ruining everything in New York when it came to transportation. And they're still feeling the effects from that, from all the parkways and the amount of policies that he did, and ruined the Bronx, ruined a whole bunch of other places. But again, this was done 100 years ago. And it's sad that this subway doesn't even get, visited anymore, the station, because it's, blocked off. So they only have a couple tours of this earlier. And here we go, back to Hong Kong. 99.9% on-time performance. Again, that's what works. The MTR, at least since before the protests of what's going on in Hong Kong. So before the Chinese government started getting involved and, messing up with Hong Kong. It's a very profitable company. It's probably one of the best transit companies in the world, and they run also lines in Australia and Sweden and in London as well. So they own privately held lines. This is the experience that should be given over to the New York subway, and I do know that New York City now has their new president, or was for a time, still is, if I recall, used to work for the MTR. So maybe they'll get better. I don't know, but that's what it is. And again, this is the problem, what's going on when government gets involved, because it usually devolves to violence, to disruptions. And again, it's sad what's going on over in Hong Kong, and I hope the people of Hong Kong are able to stop this specter of communism, this death cult stupidity that's been plaguing humanity for the longest of time, because this is what the government will do eventually. It usually leads itself to guns. That's what happens. So again, what the government has done, it's especially in the United States, it's hypocrisy. This was a Washington Times article, and this is probably one of the only news sources that are actually pretty well done in this time and age. Free markets for me, but not for thee. So the amount of absurdity behind airline subsidies is insane compared to what rail lines get, especially Amtrak. So if you want to run in this system, it's not working. It's not working well because it's unsustainable and it's imbalanced. So look at this. It's commonplace for those airlines to receive tax subsidies from state or local economic development authorities in exchange for servicing a particular airport that doesn't have enough market demand to support a given route. How much? Over $71 billion since 2000, according to research from 2015. That's insane. Again, 10 ways taxpayers subsidize U.S. airlines. U.S. military training pilots, Essential Air Service, the Fly America Act, Air Transportation Safety and Stabilization Act, airport construction, Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. That's what I told you. They usually don't go bankrupt, just like the big three auto companies. GM has not paid back all its loans or all the subsidies that it get, all that it got back from the government. So that's money that we pay to the government so they can give it over to GM, and GM doesn't pay it back. How insane is that? Consolidation, airport slots and rules and labor negotiations. So this is again, and what happened to it's a difference to how the trains and how railroads started in the United States. Railroads started in the United States because they bought the lands that the U.S. government already took. So if you want to be in a leftist argument, okay, you want to take it from the left, you can say that the American government stole the land from the Indians, if you want to go ahead and say that, killed and slaughtered millions of them to take the land, and then, sold it over to the railroads. Okay? So, how does that make any sense? And the same thing that the government went ahead and basically started the airlines and profit off of them. So again, it's not the same thing. It's apples and oranges. It's not the same comparison. Okay? The way the railroad started was they were private companies. They bought the land, whether it was fairly or not, or the government gave it to them after it was taken from somebody else. Wherever argument you want to take it, it's not the same thing. That the government went ahead and taxed railroads basically to death to go ahead and fund roads and airports and airlines. We've already done this research. We did this in a previous video. How much do taxpayers support airlines? Again, so some journalists have actually gone through this, and this is insane, the amount of money that the US government is spending. Somewhere upwards of billions, about 150 billion according to WikiLeaks that got a disclosure from there. And of course, then you have some people that go ahead to, oh, the governments are subsidizing airlines? So what? Well, so what? That's not how it's supposed to work. Okay? The US government is not supposed to be going ahead and doing that. But this is the hypocrisy that this supposed free market system that we're supposed to be in is supposed to be running. And it's not. And I quote from an early article over here from the Ohio Association of Rail Passengers. This was back in 2002 or something like that. How long ago this was. So here's a quote. As been noted by well-known conservative Paul Weyrich of the Free Congress Foundation, the current transportation system, dominated by highway and air transportation, is by no means a free market outcome. Rather, it is the result of massive and sustained government intervention on behalf of these two modes. Indeed, before government became involved on these massive scale, most transit and intercity rail transportation systems were privately owned for-profit enterprises. And this is what happens. Because airlines aren't beholden to the same rules. They don't care. They can just go back to the government and get more money, get more funding. They don't have to go ahead and improve their services because it's business as usual. They don't have to. They're protected. The rules are rigged due to the amount of power and money that is concentrated in this cabal. Okay? And they can support these failing enterprises because, again, when you really take away all the amount of subsidies and whatnot, most of these airlines are failing. They're just being artificially propped up by the government. And they don't have to improve business. They don't have to improve their speed. They don't have to improve their amenities. They've been taken away more from customers. They've been taking away more value. And they don't care. They can stick us in smaller seats. They can make us all stand on the airplane and have us all strapped in around, on the airlines and strap us all on the roof, and they don't care. As long as you're getting paid, there's no other way for you to go around. Land of the free, right? So, again, this video got even long. This thing even turned off at this point. It's like, you know what? Shut up, Demetrius. You've gone on for too long. But this has to be talked about. This is important. This just can't be in like a 10-minute video or whatnot, because what's going on in American rail transportation is insane. And I really hope some sense can come into this. And it's gonna have to come from us. Okay? So let me know in the comments below what you think about all this madness and what can be done to fix this, because hopefully some solutions can come about soon before it's too late.